Good day, and welcome to the Phil Barrett Show here at the Two Guys and a Mic podcast at an undisclosed location in Saratoga County. Pleasure to be with all of you here today. I'm Phil Barrett, Town of Clifton Parktown Supervisor and Chairman of the Saratoga County Board of Supervisors, and we're going to talk today about the election that happened just a couple of days ago, and also get some insight on the local level from one of our guests. But first, I'd like to begin by talking a little bit about the national election. But before we do that, I do want to introduce our very austere guests that are with us today. The first is Jay Thompson from the Two Guys and a Mic podcast. Hi, Jay. How are you?
Hey, Phil. How are you?
Very good. Also with us today is Joe Suhrada. Joe is the commissioner of the Saratoga County Board of Elections on the Republican side. And for folks that don't know, each county has a Board of Elections with a Republican and Democrat person that's appointed by the parties. Little checks and balances there. So Joe's on the Republican side. He's also chairman of the Saratoga County Republican Committee. How you doing today, Joe?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Joe. And Joe's going to be able to give us some insight on local election results, early voting, and how that process played out this week. First, we'll start with the presidential election. And I think there were some key takeaways from that race. I think the Trump campaign, with their resounding victory, did a very good job with, one, registering new voters, two, making sure those voters got to the polls, some in early voting, some on Election Day, and I assume they worked hand in hand with the Republican National Committee, Mike Whatley, Laura Trump, who are fairly new in that position, but having that coordination, I'm sure, helped a great deal, focused on the right things, focused on new voters, getting people to the polls. And then, of course, there was the issues. We had the advantage as voters to between the two candidates. We had somebody that was in office not long ago with a record in office. We had the last 4 years to compare that to, and the current vice president being a part of that administration, and then how that presidential candidate, Mrs. Harris, would proceed in the next 4 years. What would be different, what would be the same from what we experienced over the last 8 years. And when it came to the issues, obviously, the people in America really sided with one side, with Donald Trump. He won not only the Electoral College fairly easily, but also also won the popular vote quite handily. First time that's happened from a Republican candidate in quite some time. So those were just a few of the takeaways I had, and I think the ground game really set the stage for a successful night for the Trump campaign. And then they executed well on the ground. They did a great job defining the issues, also speaking directly to the issues. And I think podcasting played a big part. I think we saw that with Mr. Trump and Mr. Vance appearing on many podcasts throughout the campaign. I'll turn to Jay here from Two Guys and a Mic and ask Jay, what were your takeaways from what we saw in the presidential election?
Yeah, to your point, I think the big key for Donald Trump this year and the Republicans as a whole is they did go to the unconventional news sources like the podcasts. Joe Rogan was a huge impact for Trump, I believe. And they also went after the college vote. The young person vote really swung pretty heavily towards the Republicans this time. They went with the use of Charlie Kirk and the Steven Crowder guys, and they went on college campuses and did heavy recruiting, and they really pretty much, mirrored what the Democrats usually do when it comes to turning out the vote. And I think that had a huge impact, especially in college towns and inner cities, that gave Donald Trump a lot of those numbers. And that indicative, and to point to, is look at Philadelphia. Harris expected a lot more points and a lot more voters in Philadelphia, and a lot of what they expected did go to Trump. New York City, Joe and I were talking while you were talking. New York City, Trump was able to peel a lot of votes away from the Democrats. Very unorthodox in the way he did it, and I think that's indicative of the way he governs and the way he campaigns. He's really bringing a new look at the way we get our votes and a new look at the way we campaign.
Well, I think a lot of what he did, you're right, did set the stage for future elections. And the gains across many demographic areas were quite impressive, including, as you just stated, young voters, right down to 18 to 24. There were significant gains.
Double-digit gains.
Yeah, over 4 years ago. Of course, when you look at the totals and the total turnout, despite the fact that we did expect overall the turnout to be very high, and I think it wasn't very close to the election 4 years ago. And I think that's going to be a topic of discussion and debate and why that might be. I don't know if you were able to look at those results, but there just weren't as many people coming out voting as there was 4 years ago.
I do think that has a lot to do with voter disenchantment with both candidates. Unfortunately,
It might have something to do with the process, too.
I don't know. I mean,
the process was a lot different 4 years ago.
Yeah, but you had weeks to vote. So
Yeah.
we had, I think, Joe, to your point when you were talking, people were able to vote for a week before the election, and then you had same-day voting. And I just don't think Democrats didn't like, Kamala Harris, let's be honest. And there are a lot of Republicans and conservatives that were not too thrilled with Donald Trump.
Yeah, but did either candidate reach where they were 4 years ago?
To that point, people decide not to participate.
Or it could be just the way the voting was handled much differently than it was 4 years ago.
Possibly.
So that's another topic I'm sure that will be debated and discussed as to why that was. As I mentioned, we also have Joe Suhrada here, Saratoga County Republican Chair. Joe, what were your takeaways from the election, presidential election?
Well, Trump reached into some constituencies that the Democrats have been protecting as their own very special little pool of voters for many, many years. He came to New York City a few weeks ago, Madison Square Garden rally, which was, of course, maligned by the mainstream media as a Nazi rally. It was filled with Jewish people, Hispanics, Asian,
Arabs.
people of color. But of course they tried to frame it that way. There was a stand-up comedian who, he's the new age, the new era's Don Rickles, by the way. He has a similar type of sour face he makes.
Good.
He's
God
a
bless
roasting comedian. He likes to really rip into people, groups. He has no holds bars. And he had made some joke about Puerto Rico being a floating island of garbage. He attacked, in a joking manner, everybody. Nobody was safe from his jokes. The Italians,
Well, he really made
Jewish people.
He really created a lot of attention for himself during that huge Tom Brady roast. I mean, and he also has a successful show that he does.
Kill
So,
Tony.
So he's definitely somebody that's becoming very successful, and
Right.
he knows how to get attention.
But
Let's face it.
to look at your point, though, Joe, the comment of him that he said that Puerto Rico was a floating island of garbage. All you gotta do is Google Puerto Rico and garbage, and they do have a big garbage issue there. So it's satire at its best, and just people didn't get it.
And entirely, he's an old school, the kind of comedians. I'm 59, so we grew up with Alan King and
Eddie
Buddy
Murphy.
Hackett, and I'm going back to the Borscht Belt comedians that we grew up on in the early 70s, who totally just ripped on everything. There was no limits. Okay,
Red Skill.
And think Alan King and Buddy Hackett, and think about Don Rickles being probably the pinnacle.
Oh, yeah.
There was no feelings involved. Okay, so if you had a thin skin, boy, you just don't go to shows like that. So this is this kind of comedian. So his joke routine included that joke. Of course, everybody laughed, including an immense number of Hispanic people there. So, it's in Puerto Rico. Half of Puerto Rico's in New York City, they say, right? But
Or
they've moved
Amsterdam.
there. Well, they moved to the mainland. Okay,
Sure.
they're Americans, and they've moved to the mainland. So the idea that Trump was all going to lose the Hispanic and the Puerto Rican vote. I watch CNN. I go around to all the stations. I don't just watch Fox. I watch everything. MSNBC. When I watch TV, and it's not often, but it's usually at 2 or 3 in the morning. By the way, and I turn that on, and I see them saying, "Well, it looks like he didn't lose. Trump did not lose support in the Puerto Rican belt of Pennsylvania, which is down by Harrisburg, and it's in the southeast corner of Pennsylvania. There's a ton of Hispanics moved there." And apparently they were very chagrined that he did not lose the votes the way they were kind of setting it up, as if Hispanic people don't have a sense of humor. Okay, this is how they believe that they can speak for those groups. All right. So what Donald Trump did, getting to my point, is he went to Madison Square and he put on a show. Only in the way that Trump could put on
He's
a
a
show,
showman.
right? It was like, and I described it this way. It was like the Woodstock of politics. People will be talking about it 20 years from now that they were there. So he puts on this big event. The boroughs had the largest growth of Trump votes of anywhere outside of South Florida and Texas. Okay, this is what amazes. Staten Island went from 48% to 66% for Trump this year.
66%.
The Queens
Wow,
went
I
from
didn't know that.
20%.
Crazy.
He's from the Queens, right?
Yeah.
Queensboro, Queens. From 20 to 38%. It's almost doubled his support in Queens. Brooklyn went from 17 to 28%. Now Brooklyn is the Tony borough, right? It's the yuppie. It's the new, the dinks and the people. There's the techies. They moved to Brooklyn. They've gentrified Brooklyn. Okay, the Bronx, which is the most minority intense borough, went from 8% to 28%. Okay, now think about this for 1 minute. The Democrats have to stop Donald Trump at all costs, and they've known this for 8 years, 9 years really, because he appeals to people who they believe they own. They believe they own the Hispanic vote, the women's vote, and the black vote. They believe that in their hearts, that they own that. That's their turf. Okay, Donald Trump is going to their turf and stealing their voters because he's talking to them the way they like to be talked to be treated like adults, to be part of the American dream, to be economically successful and upscale. He is attempting to make them understand that his language is all about success for Americans. That's what he's doing. He's not talking to them like they're little children, like the Democrats like to do. And it's resoundingly important that we understand why Donald Trump has to be stopped by the Democrats and why they believe he has to be stopped. He threatens their very existence. So this is why every attempt has been made to drum up charges on, his affair, supposed affair with Stormy Daniels, and why it was against the law for him to pay her, when this has been a habit of politicians and industrialists and oligarchs and everything else for many, many, many decades. This is a lawfare, okay, at its highest level. Okay, they've committed lawfare against Trump because they know he's an existential. Why can't I talk today? Existential threat.
Because we're all up late. 2 days ago.
Well, I've been up late a few days, and I have no voice. But an existential threat to the Democratic Party, and he's drawing people to vote in new patterns, which will probably resound for decades. So this is why I've been saying, well, they have to stop Trump. I mean, they can't do anything but stop Trump, and he keeps them up at night like a boogeyman hiding under the bed. And this has been their focus. They've understood this. Yet everything they have done, they've gone a bridge too far. They've jumped the shark, which they're notorious. I mean, what will they come up with next? They've got their organizers and their supporters and their low-level operatives repeating the same thing If you're for Trump, you're canceled. You're a racist. You're a
Well,
misogynist.
I think we see that with a lot of the finger pointing that's going on after a loss, which is not uncommon, but it seems to be especially poignant with the Democrat Party following the law. You have quotes that are attributed to the Obama loyalists, the Biden loyalists, the Harris loyalists, Harris people blaming Biden for supposedly putting them so far behind that they couldn't possibly. I think the term that was used was dig themselves out of the hole. You've got Biden people coming back and saying, "Well, we beat Trump. How come she couldn't beat Trump?" So a lot of finger pointing back and forth, and through that process, a party should really understand why they lost and what happened.
They don't.
And that doesn't seem to be happening, but a lot of finger pointing going on.
Well, I've always said to the local Democrats, when I encounter them and such in political races, their platform is, you're idiots and cult followers, and they use a lot of four-letter words too when they say this, and that you're a bunch of morons, and I said, well, that's a heck of a way to convince people to come to your side.
Yeah.
Make fun of them and call them names.
But if you look at the media is doing that. They're not.
Of course.
They're not looking at what the party did and where they lacked and failed to bring out the votes. They're calling the blacks misogynist. They're calling Puerto Ricans racist against black. They're saying the bro vote is racist is sexist against women. Why don't you look at what your party failed to convey to the voter?
Well, and that's part of the postmortem that they should be doing as a party, and if they're not doing that, that's up to them.
They always say they're going to do that stuff,
don't.
but they really don't. Then they start back up with the belittling, berating, talking down to people, and making them feel guilty. And this is oftentimes where the polls lie, because people lie to the pollsters or they refuse to answer, which is non-response bias, by the way. And I tried to explain to someone one day recently, I said, well, if you've ever been in a labor union and, you get a phone call from some number you don't know and they ask you how you're going to vote, well, you're a little suspicious.
You're not answering.
Maybe that's the shop steward or, using some type of setup because, quite frankly, the big labor unions have polling units, okay? So a lot of folks don't know. The SEIU has one out in Tacoma, Washington. They have a building filled with people that do polls, oftentimes for the Democratic candidates and parties and things. They can call you from a number that's out of state, and they're going to ask you on your cell phone now who you like for president. Okay, well, if you might answer the wrong way, you might find out later on your grievance goes in the shredder. Okay, you have a problem with a management or something like that. This is some of the things that the Democrats and people like the pollsters even, who are in that elite class, the expert consultant class that I like to talk about, they don't always understand because they really don't get working people. They don't get the rank and file because God forbid that they would live next door to anybody like that.
Live in the ivory towers.
They like to live in their ivory towers of academia and professionalism, and they don't deign to rub elbows with people like that. So they don't get the dynamics of those. Like, we come from a working class background. We come from blue-collar towns. We grew up with the GE guys. It's something that oftentimes the blue bloods who now inhabit the upper echelons of the Democratic Party.
The Reagan Democrats.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But the blue bloods are the elite. These are the former Republicans of 50 years ago and 70 years ago, okay? The college professors I recall in the early 80s, when I went to college, I would describe as the old Rockefeller Republican caste, okay? Now these people are the pro-Hamas, woke group of people. I describe them as being white with a beard and a WAMC cap and expensive eyeglasses, and with boat shoes,
PBS
by the way,
radio.
Lands' End jeans and boat
Well,
shoes.
and we have seen a realignment, if you will, that's been talked about quite a bit as far as the coalition that is supporting Republican candidates like Donald Trump. And it was clear from the results in this election with some of the increases that we saw across demographics that that realignment is happening with every group that the media likes to put people in. I don't always agree with how they put people into specific groups and everything else, but when they give you that information and compare it this go around on Tuesday compared to past years, that realignment is happening within every demographic area.
But I think the biggest difference this year, though, and correct me if I'm wrong, both of you guys, you've been in politics a lot longer, maybe paid a lot more attention. But I don't recall in every single election I ever participated in being called names by the opposition as an electorate, not as a candidate or anything else. But when was the last time a president called half the country a piece of garbage? When was the last time a governor called half of her people she represents un-American? I think all of that contributed to people saying, you know what, I'm not a bad person. I may not like Donald Trump, but I'm not a bad person, and you're not going to keep calling me names without having any recourse.
No,
Yeah. Donald Trump may call his adversary a name, but he doesn't call the Democrats as his neighbor a name. And I think eventually people got tired of that, and that was one of the reasons why. In that voting booth, they're like, I don't agree with Donald Trump, but I'm tired of being called names, and I'm going to show them where I lie. And I think that's how Donald Trump won this time.
Well, I always say now, I'll put my Republican.
Do you recall ever being called names like that?
Well, I get called names all the time, but
but accolades are not the same as name calling. Phil.
But you're right. Overall, there was more and more of that this year than it had been in past years when Donald Trump was running. It was more focused just on him, and there was some, I think, intimation that the people that support him are along the same lines, but it was much more explicit this time. But it was more explicit. It was a constant drumbeat, and it came from many, many different elected officials. And so, from that standpoint, I think it was definitely different.
Well, I say as a Republican chairman, if that's your platform, if calling names and making fun of people and deriding people is your platform and you're against us, keep doing it. Keep that platform, because that's who I want to run against.
Is that current?
Yeah.
So did they call Nevada and Arizona?
Nevada looks quite much like it's going to be for Trump. It looks like the 312, but I'm sure it's going to be a few more official days. It gets to a point where when you have let's say 100,000 votes cast somewhere, and one guy's ahead by 2,000 votes, and you have 2,000 absentee ballots. It's mathematically impossible for those ballots to all go to the opposite candidate. It's just that's where people get very suspicious. All right. They break typically in a similar fashion to the votes that are cast on the machines. Sometimes the absentees used to be in the day they broke to the Republicans because they were military men and ladies. Okay. Today tend to be people that are being trained to vote by paper. Okay. More so. And I think it's a slight edge to the Democrats. So if the thing is down to 20 votes and there's 2,000, well, you could lose the election. But it gets to the point where it's mathematically and logically impossible.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think it was clear that there was a good set of candidates on the Republican side running for Senate positions. And that, coupled with some coattails from the top of the ticket, had led to the Republicans taking I wouldn't say sizable, but maybe by today's standards, sizable plurality in the Senate. But they do have a few votes to margin there on the Democrats when it comes to the Senate coming together and considering policy. I think the one question left is the House. It seems as though most people that follow this closely on the national level are saying the Republicans will hold the House, but there were many very close House races that did go to the Democrats. Both sides picked up a few so far, but we're still waiting to find out if indeed the Republicans or perhaps the Democrats are going to control the House. So I think that's the last outstanding question as far as balance of power on the federal level.
It's hard to believe that we're actually relying on California to keep us with the House, because you were hoping that their congressional seats remain in Republican hands, because those are the ones that were the most hotly contested right now.
That was New York 2 years ago.
Yeah, where a lot of those flipped back to blue,
A
unfortunately.
couple of them did, yeah. The
I was
Hudson
surprised
Valley-
Marinero lost.
Yeah.
That was my next point.
That was
The
crazy.
Hudson Valley, coming up the Hudson Valley, going further north, and even into Saratoga County, we're seeing the purpling of the population. The New York people are, well, with remote work, they're moving up from Jersey, Connecticut, the boroughs, Long Island, Westchester. They're moving upstate, okay? They're fleeing the results of Democrat policies, and they're moving upstate to find refuge. And they're bringing their voting patterns with them oftentimes, and particularly in federal elections, we do see a distinction where they are choosing wisely, I might add, very wisely, to remain with local Republicans and to cast their votes unwisely for Democrats in federal races. So, and even in a little bit in state races. So we certainly do see the purpling of upstate, and the further north you go, Warren County even, okay, Saratoga County where we live, we see a lot of ballots that are cast for Harris, maybe for Paul Tonko, maybe for Kirsten Gillibrand, who would be right after the presidency, and then dropping down to Republican. But we also see ballots where people are casting ballots now for Democrats on the federal and state level, and curiously avoiding the Democrats at the town and county level, okay? Well, I have a few theories. I believe some of them are internecine, okay? That some of the Democrats don't want their own people running things for whatever reason in their town, because they know them too well and they know they're not qualified.
And
to
all
do it.
politics is local, right?
Right. But the other point is, even these purple voters, these middle-of-the-road voters, and even these Democrat voters, they moved here, they looked around, and they saw Saratoga County as a shining gem in a sea of rough stones. They've seen the lowest property taxes, the lowest spending per capita, the lowest sales tax, the highest property values, the highest level of public safety, terrific roads, parks, activities, wonderful things that Phil Barrett and other supervisors and county leaders have brought to them by wisely managing their money and all the assets the county has. Trails, okay? Where do you find trails like what we have, right? That they have done this, okay? Our leaders here have done this. And the local populace, if they've tuned into things and they understand things just a little bit and enough to understand them, they'll realize they don't want to put wackos in charge of that. Okay, they don't mind wackos in Washington, but
Well, I think
don't want them
I
running.
think a lot
their
of it
town.
has to do with the different issues. So, when you're considering a candidate on the federal level and even the state level in the Senate and the Assembly, it's a different set of issues that you're making your decision on, as opposed to local government. So a lot of times the policy and how we look at the world might be more inclined as Republicans on the local level, might be more inclined as to how a Republican in the state assembly, Senate, or Congress might think about things. But the issues are completely different. And I think it comes down more to performance and delivering results right where you live, as opposed to a lot of these other abstract issues that come into play.
So, to your point, then, how do you convert that voter that votes locally Republican to then go statewide Republican and nationally Republican? If what you're saying is that that constituent comes in and says, "Well, I'm going to vote Republican locally, but then I'm going to throw my vote to Democrats in the House and the Senate, and then I'm going to throw my vote Democrat to the state house. How do you stop that from happening?
I don't know that you can convince a Trump hater to love Trump. I don't know that that's easy to do. There are a lot of middle of the road voters that, for whatever reason, don't like Donald Trump. They think that he's too acerbic or whatever the case may be. But I don't think it's because they really hate life under Donald Trump when we had it for 4 years and the economy and things like that. But they don't like seeing him on TV. They don't like the look on his face. They don't like his haircut. They don't like his use of syntax, his malaprop, whatever it may be. They don't enjoy him bragging, for instance. Okay, he brags, like he's won the popular vote. We're going to hear about that quite a bit from him.
We are.
And some people can't get past the public persona that is Donald Trump. So therefore, they are going to vote against him no matter what. Now, I think, let's just be honest. Someone like Nikki Haley, they have a lot of respect for. I think she probably could have carried Saratoga County if she were on the ballot. That doesn't mean she would have carried the nation. I don't know. But my opinion is we have a more purple clientele of voters here. Okay.
Well, it's interesting because Saratoga County broke a 28-year streak of voting for the presidential winner, and Saratoga County has supported Democrats and Republicans in the past, but this is this year where candidate Harris, Vice President Harris, won the Saratoga County and beat Donald Trump, albeit by a small margin. But it's certainly not uncommon for Saratoga County to support a Democrat president or somebody running for U.S. Congress, running for a federal Senate seat. So that those are not uncommon whatsoever. But I think what we saw here was, although Donald Trump did not win Saratoga County, and even though candidates like Senator Gillibrand and Congressman Tonko and others did very well in their races here in the county, on the local level, county races, some special elections for towns, the Republicans did very well. So there is a definite difference when people are going into the voting booth. But again, I think that goes back to we're dealing with different issues. We're working to deliver results on the local level where people see that day to day. And a lot of that just comes down to, are you focused on the proper priorities, and are you getting things done for folks? And let's go through some of these races real quick.
Really quick, Phil.
Yeah.
I'm just curious because you got your numbers there. Do you have the gender breakdown of who voted for what?
No, I don't.
Okay. Do you have that, Joe?
No, I don't have that handy.
I would just.
I thought there was no trick questions today.
I was just curious on how Saratoga County broke down based on gender.
Yeah,
Because I would be willing to say that the gender vote is what probably propelled Kamala Harris and the Democrats in Saratoga.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I typically don't even look at those demographics at all. I just look at the total numbers because at the end of the day, that's what matters. Getting into the demographic groups, as I discussed earlier, I don't like a lot of what's done through the media when they're analyzing those types of things and how they're talked about. So I just like looking at the total numbers. And when you look at some of the races, just to give you guys an idea in case you didn't follow these as closely, so there was Senator Jim Tedisco was up for election. He won handily without any issue whatsoever. We had Assemblywoman Walsh also won by a decent margin. Carrie Warner, Assemblywoman Warner, also won her race. We had local candidates like Matt McLaughlin, who's on the Malta Town Board, He was a guest on our show just recently, and his showing was very positive, and we congratulate Matt on his victory.
I'm sure that he was on here. That was the impact that pushed him
I'm
across
sure it
the line.
was. I'm sure
it
it
was
was.
a great interview. It was amazing.
I'll be sure to remind him of that. But yes, I'm sure it was. And for county treasurer, which is a very important position. And we had our acting county treasurer, Joanne Kupferman, who won by a pretty wide margin. On the Republican-Democrat line, it was approximately 64,000 to 50,000. So, so that was a convincing victory. And there were some other races. There was a town board race in the town of Milton. As well, the Republican was victorious there. There was a race for judge in Milton, and the Republican won that race as well. So that kind of gives you an idea of some of the local results on the Republican side that were very positive, despite the other numbers that in races that were won by Democrats on the federal level. In Saratoga County, they might have been close, might have been a wide margin. But either way, it was a good night for us locally.
Where did Prop 1 fall in the county?
I don't have those
It
numbers.
passed
but
in the county.
It did.
Yeah, I'm trying to drum up a few numbers right now, and then if you want to keep talking.
Well, I want to talk to you, Joe, about early voting. So you had a very aggressive campaign to get Republicans out to vote on early voting. I'm not sure what the Democrats are doing on that. I'm sure they were also working on it. But we saw a huge increase in early voting overall. But the difference on the Republican side was...
Well, when early voting first
incredibly
came
large.
about in 19, it wasn't easily embraced by Republicans.
Donald Trump was staunchly against it.
Right. And then what happened was, just like oftentimes, Republicans tend to be more traditional. They vote on election day. They tend to believe in, the old ways, a little bit more strongly. And this year, compared to 2020, we had a few more polling sites, this year, because our population is growing, and it's based on number of polling sites, is based on the population of the voters. Mm-hmm. We had a 95% increase in Republicans and conservatives voting early. The Democrats had a 27% increase. So it did go up for them, but we almost quadrupled what their increase was. Then the non-enrolled or independent voters, if you will, who are not in either party, theirs went up 43%. So it kind of gave you an idea about Republican enthusiasm. Mm-hmm. It's not a poll. You can't use it as a poll. You can only gauge enthusiasm from it. So when Election Day came, Republicans had about a 12% margin. In early voting, Republicans and conservatives outmatched Democrats and working families by about 150 votes. It was like 15,000 and change, each. So we had a whisker better turnout in early voting, and then we beat them about 12% on Election Day. At the end, we had a 9% increase in turnout over those groups. I really thought it was going to bring a Trump victory, in the county, and we were shy by about 1,500 votes. And what I think happened is the independents, those purple voters we always talk about, the ones that are really making the big decisions because there's more of them growing every day than anyone else, they voted against Trump, but they voted Republican. Like, for instance, our very professional and qualified county treasurer, Joanne Kupferman, won handily, right? Yep. Jim Tedesco won handily. Put that. I think Jim's still out there knocking on doors right away.
He might be
for 2 years from now. He's out. Once he gets going, he's hard to stop. He's got more energy than a 20-year-old. So I think that when you look at these numbers and you start recognizing that they're splitting the baby, they're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. They're not voting straight Democrat or straight Republican. These folks are flipping up and down, and they're zigzagging on their ballot from top to bottom. This is what we're seeing. And these are the people who understand the Saratoga County Republicans are their own brand of Republican, and they're rewarding competence and good judgment, experience, and ability. Okay? That's what they're doing. We have our own brand here, and that's our brand.
You know how we were talking about how Democrats need to do a postmortem on why they lost certain things. I think as Republicans and conservatives, we also have to look at why he didn't carry more in some of those places like Saratoga County. And I really think that we need to look at the abortion issue. I think that really hurt Donald Trump in a lot of the places that he could have gotten better. I think as nationally we have to take that off the table. I think he would have won in Saratoga County if that wasn't on there.
You notice how it just keeps getting brought back up, like
Because
it's
it is
been,
an issue, yeah.
It's been really settled with the last decision where it's back to the states. But even
Agreed.
in New York, they've come up with this Proposition 1, and they focused on that, which it's really not. It's already protected here. But they brought it up, and they'll bring it up with another. They'll have Proposition 95, in 2 years. They'll bring it up again. There'll be something else that'll even dial in more specifically about abortion. It's their one thing that they know they can get women voters out on to be upset about. Much like George Floyd was a trigger point against Trump in 2020. And was used against Trump. They oftentimes need to have something they could exploit in order to upset people and get people scared.
Emotion politics, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think it's ever going away. They won't be happy until they've got it, written on every building that abortion is the number one right. It just becomes an issue that I don't know that is concerns every voter anymore because they understand it's part of life now, but it certainly has been reused and retreaded and trumped back out there, marched back out there for people, and you don't hear Donald Trump really talking about it anymore. I mean, not that he ever really did, but it's one of those things that will always be brought out because it brings out voters.
Well, it's definitely an issue that is talked about a lot, and as you said, will continue to be. But you're listening and/or watching the Phil Barrett Show here on the Two Guys and a Mic podcast. Jay Thompson is with me, also Joe Suhrada, chairman of the Saratoga County Republican Committee, and also Board of Elections Commissioner for Saratoga County on the Republican side. We're breaking down the election results, both national and local. As we look forward, they're already talking about the midterms in 2 years, and
Can't even get over the one set, and we're already into the next.
And certainly there'll obviously be local elections in the next year or two and beyond as well. So I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from this election, both on the national and local level, and we're talking a little bit about that and how things played out this week and how things might play out in the future. I think one thing I certainly hope the Trump administration focuses on, and I'm sure they will, I'm sure they're going to get started very quickly, getting people in place and appointed and confirmed as quickly as possible, having all of that done early and get everybody in place. He's got 4 years. He's not running again. But I really hope they just focus on, at least initially, the financial issues that were discussed in the campaign. Focus on the finances, helping bring costs down for people, helping people put more money in their pocket, both through policy and just generally an improved economy. So I'm hoping that's what the first focus will be, and I assume it will be. But what one thing would you like them to focus on, Jay, as President Trump takes office?
You beat me to that question. That's what I was going to ask you guys. What I would love to see is Trump really wants to talk about energy, but I think the overarching problem that we also have in our country is our deficit. We have a big problem with money, and I would love to see them. I would love to see somebody get in his ear and propose something like they did in Norway, which for every bit of natural resource that's pulled out of the United States, the ground of our country, a portion, an itemized number, a dollar amount, goes back strictly to pay our debt. So let's say I'll use a PFA, and for anybody who doesn't know, a PFA is a pluck from air number. Let's say for every barrel of oil that comes out of the ground, a dollar of that barrel goes strictly to pay national debt. Every bucket of coal that comes out, 50 cents goes to pay national debt. That's the cost of doing business and mining in the United States, strictly for national debt. I would love that to be something that is approached to the Trump administration.
Well, and
to
the
try to pay that
industries
off.
might be open to that if
Yep.
there's more opportunity for them to find, seek, and extract those raw materials. So that might be something the industry would be okay with. I know Mr. Trump has said many times, "Drill, baby, drill." So perhaps that'll be part of the plan.
That's my take.
Yeah. What about you, Joe?
Well, I look at it as the economy is always the number one issue. I always have looked at it that way all my life. I went to college for economics as my major. I believe that, good jobs, low inflation has always been my mantra. When I saw this so-called Inflation Reduction Act, I knew as an economics student there's only one thing that causes inflation. It's excess money supply. It's called fiscal policy. It's been a rule for 100 years or more, and yet it somehow has been forgotten. It's kind of like the recipe for concrete. The Romans had it. It was lost in the Dark Ages, okay? We've entered the Dark Ages of thinking where we can just continue to print money and call it an Inflation Reduction Act and then flood the economy with money supply and expect there wouldn't be inflation. It devalues the currency. It's something that Larry Summers knows. Now, anyone that knows who Larry Summers is, he was Clinton's economics advisor. He was actually the Treasury Secretary, and he understands that very well. He was Obama's economic czar, and he warned Joe Biden, Kamala Harris. He warned them, don't do this. This is a bad idea. Sure enough, they did it on the heels of the COVID expenditures, which were pretty significant in and of themselves. We have massive inflation. So that's job number one, okay? So that means some measure of government austerity has to be instituted and spending has to be controlled and money supply has to be brought down. It's the only way you're going to reduce interest rates, by the way, so that young people can own homes. Very important. No government program is going to make young people own homes except fiscal restraint, which will lead to lower inflation and lower interest rates, which will like me, I have a 2.6% interest, right, on my mortgage. Okay, 2.6%. This is what young people need.
Yeah,
okay?
not 7 and 8 and 9 and 10.
Right. And the same goes for car loans. People need to buy a vehicle now. They're $50,000 to buy a car.
And 20% interest in some cases.
Right. And also, this is why when we talk about when you buy a car and it's $50,000, the 7%, bring this right back home, the 7% sales tax is better than the 8%. You know why?
Sure.
It's a $500 discount on your car that you don't have to negotiate with the car salesman because you live in Saratoga County. You just save $500. This is why people appreciate Phil Barrett and others, because they're fighting for things like that. They're not saying, hey, let's raise this so we can create a slush fund and hire more of our buddies. Okay, this is what the Democrats do. Believe me, I lived in Schenectady County for most of my life. I know what they do. I served on the county legislature. I voted against all those crazy ideas because all they wanted to get more money into the government's hand, and they didn't care about the young folks who had to buy a car or buy furniture for their new home. They didn't care about that. They just cared about building up the government and giving jobs and contracts to their friends. So this is why our voters here, again, love Saratoga County and recognize the good work we're doing.
And we've seen recently where interest rates are ticking back up. And that put a lot of pressure on the Fed to not cut interest rates again, although they did. So I think the Fed's working contrary to the the trend in interest rates as the money supply has continued to grow through government spending, and we'll have a show on that type of topic soon. I want to talk about the markets and interest rates, and we'll have a guest in here to talk about that, because that's something that I think a lot of people don't always pay a lot of attention to, but it's very important to know where the trends are going and how things might play out in the future as you plan your personal and business financial decision making. As we move forward, Joe, just released the county budget, and very, very pleased with the budget that we've released at Saratoga County. There was some various quotes from me as far as how that budget played out. It's I would say a very unexciting budget, because there's nothing huge in there that's new and exciting, but it does focus on all the proper priorities and does focus on what's important in Saratoga County to the residents we serve. One area that we are investing a great deal of money is in the Board of Elections. We approved the purchase, the Board of Supervisors, we approved the purchase of new voting machines. There's also going to be some other important investments that we're making there that have been supported by Joe and his fellow commissioner. And overall, we want to make sure that the election process in Saratoga County is as effective and as efficient and protected as it can be. And as this was your first election here, Joe, as the Board of Elections Commissioner, what overall, how did things go? I know you were new to the position. You did a great job with your early voting planning and campaigning and executing. And as far as the actual voting itself, early voting, there were lines on a consistent basis, at least in Clifton Park.
The library was always packed.
Yeah, and other places. And moving into Election Day, I walked into my polling place, didn't wait in any line. I just walked in, walked out as I usually do. But you have to remember, on Election Day, we've got all the districts, all the polling places open. When it's early voting, there's several places around the county, and they're chosen geographically to make it as convenient as possible for everybody who lives in the county. But overall, what were your thoughts on how the election process itself played out?
Well, the early voting increases were immense, so I look at everything and how we can do it better next time. May not be the same way. I never look at it and say, oh, that's this. We do it the same way. It's how we always did it. Whenever I hear that, my head explodes. And I've heard this all my life from different people. And I say, you should always try to do things better. So in the next presidential election, I can guarantee you we need more sites. And I'm going to say two. That's my position, is we need one in Half Moon and one in the Moreau, the town of Moreau, South Glens Falls area. So that would alleviate many of the problems, like the lines, okay? The other thing is we have iPads that we use for what's called the poll book. So when you come in, you notice you write on the iPad now, and you don't have a signature on a piece of paper like you used to have, okay? So those iPads, of course, cannot be updated anymore the way, as time goes on, the way that they should be. So we need new iPads, and we have that figured into next year. We need faster and better printers. We need the connectors and the cables. There's a little thing the tech guys call a dongle. It's a little box that 3 things plug into. It goes from the iPad to the printer, okay? So, because iPads we know they're designed to be Wi-Fi, right? Mm-hmm. These are not Wi-Fi. These are being used in a different manner, okay? So we're wiring directly to the printer. So these are the things that have to be upgraded to provide a better experience for the voters. On the Election Day side, we actually need less polling places and less districts, because I asked a voter, he called me yesterday, said, how many polling places do you think we have? And he said, oh, in the whole county. And he said, I don't know, 20? I said, we have 84 polling places in our county. We'd like to see that come down a little bit because nobody's experiencing terrible long lines on Election Day with early voting and the plethora of paper ballots, which now, whole nother topic, you need no excuse now to get a paper Election Day ballot, okay? Because it's called an early voting mail ballot. And there's no place to tell them you're ill, you're in the hospital, you're on vacation, you're on a business trip. You simply get one by asking, okay? So more people are utilizing that, okay, which means the pressure on Election Day at the polling sites for traffic is immensely reduced by the tune of about 35 or 40%. So now we can have less polling places. Unfortunately, sometimes somebody has to drive an extra mile or something like that. In a county like Saratoga, should not be a big deal. Not to disenfranchise anybody, but we're all used to driving in our cars and going
Well,
further
but another
distances.
part of that, Joe, is too. You mentioned on Election Day there aren't lines,
Right.
and I just said how I walked in.
Correct.
And there was no line at all. I walked right up to the desk, and they took care of me. They didn't ask me for my driver's license, by the way.
No, they
But
cannot ask
that's,
you.
But that's not allowed in New York State. I don't know.
It's
if you
not
knew that.
allowed.
Did you know that?
However, you can provide it, and they will scan it, and it will make your check-in quicker and more accurate because they won't mistake you for anyone.
But my point is, in that election polling place, just like many others, there's multiple districts
Right.
in there.
Right.
So even with the fact there's multiple districts in the polling place, we're still not experiencing any line whatsoever.
Right.
The other problem we have is we've had a difficult time, again, depending on the year, but I would say in recent years it's become a little more acute. We've had a difficult time filling election positions, poll watchers on that are there when you go into the voting booth. And thank God we have some terrific people that work very hard to recruit those people. We all really try to help recruit them. But, it's a long day, so a lot of people will say, well, I'll work a half a day, but I don't want to work a whole day, which means you need more. And it's been difficult just finding enough people to fill all of those slots. So I think in the future it's important that we right-size our polling process to the realities of today. And I think that's one thing that we need to take into account as well.
100%. Right sizing is the right term.
Playing devil's advocate, just because this is out of my wheelhouse, other than the point, and I understand the staffing issue, but what is the downside to eliminating polling places?
Well, you can't make people drive, 10 miles. They have.
But why wouldn't you want to just keep what's there now? It works. It's worked for.
Oh, you mean you're trying to say why should we just leave things the way they are?
Why don't we leave it at 88 polling places?
Well, okay. Let me give you a historical example.
Yeah.
Many empires have grown in size to the point where they had far-flung outposts. I call these far-flung outposts. The more outposts you have, the more chance that they'll be overrun. Okay, and when I say overrun, I don't mean that we're hostile forces that are going to come in.
I said, Jesus, I guess I really want to go out the votes in Saratoga County.
But there's more problems.
There's more problems.
There's
right?
more problems.
Like
the
you
more
have
polling
to,
places you have.
It can open it up for.
So in the Indian Wars, we had all these outposts, these forts, Fort Kearny, and you go out Fort Jackson. They'd have all these outposts, and then once in a while the Sioux Indians would come along and wipe them all out, and nobody knew about it for a few days, because you have to feed them, you have to send supplies, you have to send ammunition, you have to send clothing, you have to make sure they're in connection to everyone back at the Pentagon, as it may be, to the command centers. So the more outposts you have, when you have 84, okay, the more problems you have. And I'll give you an example of the problems. The day before the election, the town of Edinburgh Parks Garage, highway garage, had an oil spill and a tank leaked, okay? And the building where we vote there is in the community center, okay, which shares a common wall. It's in the same building. So the whole place stunk like fuel oil. So they had to move it to the town hall, which thank God was only 50 feet away. Okay, but my point is that could have happened on election day. Could have been a huge disaster. Okay, we had another site where they didn't have the keys to open up in Ballston the machines. You open up the machine with a key, you take your supplies out, you plug everything in, you got ready to go. The keys were missing. They couldn't start the election. And literally I drove down Route 50 with the keys when we got the call. I drove right there with the keys, and we were still open half an hour late. We had another polling site where one of the elderly poll inspectors, God love her, got lost on the way there, and we opened late. Okay, we had another one where
So
they didn't have the
avoid
keys.
issues.
Right. Okay. So the more places you have, the more human resources you have. With human resources, it's fraught with difficulty.
Sure.
Someone gets sick, especially in the era of COVID. You know, if you get that COVID cold, you better stay home. God forbid. So you have problems like that. You have illnesses. You have bad weather incidences, which means a certain percentage aren't going to get there on time. You know, we had beautiful weather, but what if it was freezing rain? We would have had 10 or 12 polling sites open late, maybe 15, because folks couldn't get there on time. They're slipping and sliding off the road. The more sites you have, the more issues, the more staffing problems. The more staffing you have, is always more problems. Let's be honest. So if you open donut shops and you own 50 of them, you know, you have 50 times as many problems as if you own one donut shop, right? You can't even keep your eye on it. So we're communicating throughout the day with 84 polling sites and 204 districts. Some of them have as few as, 20 voters in a district.
But you
Does
gotta
that
stay
sound
open
absurd?
for 9 hours.
Right. Now, each machine, these new machines, we can hold 4,000 votes. We don't want 4,000 people voting on one machine. But it's not crazy to have 1,000 people vote on a machine throughout the course of election day, or 800 people. The law currently allows us to have 2,000 voters in a district, okay? None of our districts are even remotely near that, okay? Some of them, as I said, are 20 voters or 30 voters. Some of them are 100 voters. Some of them are 200 voters. There's no need. By the way, for every district, you're legally mandated to have 4 election workers, 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, at the cost of about $1,100 a day. So it just in human resources on election day, we spend $250,000 paying the inspectors, okay, of taxpayer money. Now, it's not like I don't want to spend the money. I know Phil loves to make sure
we
people are
increased
paid. We increased their pay
as a
right.
way to the
Right.
Board of Supervisors
s-
agreed with our proposal to increase the pay as a way to try to recruit and retain some of the poll workers because, like I said, we've been running short.
816 poll inspectors are needed on election day. Okay.
Yeah, but now you extrapolate that to a full week worth of early voting.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Now we have 9 days of early voting where you need
Four
8.
four inspectors per.
No, you need 8 for that, actually, because it's actually more work. It's done in a different methodology, so you need 8.
Oof.
So we have a huge budget. It's close to $1 million for 2 elections to have these polling inspectors. Now, I won't talk about money because I'll take money off the table because elections are expensive, but I will talk about staffing. And everyone knows that you can't even walk into McDonald's and get a cheeseburger
That's why I
fast
said
anymore.
staffing, yep.
You can't find a worker at Home Depot. You can't get when you go to the
So I
insurance
own a
office.
business. I know all
We
about it, man.
all have a problem with staffing. People ask, where did the workers go? I say, I don't know. Maybe they got raptured. I really don't know where all the workers went since COVID. It's
crazy.
But I know, Phil, you got a beautiful system of pools in Clifton Park. Nobody in the capital region has the beautiful pools Clifton Park residents. Lifeguards. The most plum job as a kid was to be a lifeguard. I was stuck washing dishes and landscaping, by the way, and washing cars, which was kind of cool because I got to watch
Worked
the
at
pool.
Hannaford.
Okay.
Shop and Save.
I picked tobacco.
Well, there you go. Big tobacco.
Yeah.
This is the jobs
Worked
we
the
had.
tobacco fields.
We had
Okay.
jobs, but the kids that were lifeguards, weren't we jealous? Come on, let's be honest. The plum job, you can't even get kids to do it. When Biden said, the reason we don't have workers, they all retired. I said, what about the lifeguards? I haven't seen any 68-year-old lifeguards lately, have you? It's always the young guys and gals. Where are they? You can't get workers. So we're having the same problem. Our parents and grandparents were in the most social generation, the World War II generation. They were so social.
Sorry, let me ask this. So why couldn't you do, why couldn't we do like a, again, thinking outside the box, like jury duty, you got to work a poll.
Oh,
That's part
yeah.
of your civic-
Oh, that'll
Yeah,
go
right.
over great. They'll want it.
Well, I think these are all just important topics
Yes.
that need to be looked at, not just in Saratoga County, but across the country. Every county, every geographic area is going to have its challenges, but this seems to be a challenge across all areas. So it's just something, trying to balance, making sure that we maintain voting as convenient as humanly possible, but also being able to have the necessary infrastructure to make that happen. You need people, you need machines. We are purchasing new machines. We are investing a lot of money, like Joe said. Elections are expensive, and we're going to spend whatever we need to spend to make sure elections are done properly in Saratoga County, and that's why we are engaging more funds toward our Board of Elections for the new machinery, new equipment, training, so on and so forth, to make sure our elections are done right. And if you watching or listening out there are interested in being a polling inspector, maybe you went to vote and said, gee, this looks like a pretty good job. And like I said, we just did increase the pay for this year at the Board of Supervisors. So again, that's another example of the large investments we're making in our election system and the Board of Elections. If that's a job that interests you, and I know it's difficult for some people to take a day off to do that, but if you have some flexibility and you are interested in that, call your local town hall, city hall, village hall, and say that you'd like to get more information about it. If you're in the Clifton Park area, you can call me at Town Hall, 371-6651. I can direct you to the right person that can give you more information. It is a long day, but what we've done is try to work with people so that if they don't feel they can work a full day for whatever reason, we'll split shifts, we'll do whatever we need to do. But it's very important that we have the prerequisite number of people at each polling place, and also that both parties are represented, because that's just part of keeping the confidence of folks that are going in to vote, keeping the confidence that things are done right, that there are checks and balances, along with the right equipment and everything else needed to put on a successful election. So, Joe, now when you were talking about the early voting, and the early voting sites are based on population, where you need to have a certain amount, and I think that, or the amount of polling places, I should say, is based on the population, and I think you're on the right track there, thinking about maybe adding another early voting spot, especially as we go into the next presidential, maybe even the midterms, because those are the elections where we see a spike because of national issues that come into play.
Right. I believe in maybe an even year election like next year may not be necessary, but I think in the midterm and presidential we need two more to operate to get those lines down. I also would like to find a new location for the Clifton Park library location, which is a little bit problematic for us. And the lines where people had to wait outside, I'd like to move people inside. Thank God we had great weather.
Yeah.
It was almost too warm one day, actually, and we had a couple people faint from the heat. It was in about 80 degrees. So I'm hoping that we can get them inside. I have a spot I'm looking at, that the owners of the property be very, I don't know if I should mention it, but we definitely have looked at a spot in Clifton Park, and would be fantastic, and they are agreeable. And, I have to work with my Democratic commissioner cohort, Cassandra Bagramian. We have to agree on everything. That's how that works down there, I've made this. I've done this here. I like props. This is a key. It's for the door. This is a key for the loading dock. This is a key for the vault. Those doors have two locks, a Democrat lock and a Republican lock. And to get into the room and to lock the room, you need two keys. This is how it works. So all of our decisions are made on a bipartisan basis, and we have to discuss them. Currently, we are discussing this 2 years ahead of time and how we're going to approach it. We are also discussing a redistricting to eliminate a district where you have, 16 voters, okay, and you have to staff that, and combining it with a district that has 300 voters, okay. Combining some districts that have 150 voters or 200 voters into one district. Okay, it's very simple. It's playing with a map.
So these districts are just strictly voter district, not representative districts.
Right.
They're voters'
Okay.
districts.
Yeah.
That's all they are. Is
Just wanted
for
to make
voting.
clarification.
Right. It doesn't mean that your assembly person
Yeah.
or your senator changes or anything like that. It just within each town there's a number of districts.
Yeah.
Clifton Park has a wild number of districts. It's like 34 districts, right?
A lot of people there.
Geographically, it's not a big town, but I think when they design
50
these,
square miles.
I'll tell you why they.
Well,
have
that's a good example.
Yeah.
50 square miles.
Yes.
That gives you an example of, district versus size of a municipality. It's going to be different everywhere. But like I said, in the place where I vote, there's three districts in that one place. And I'm sure it was steady throughout the day, but there weren't not any lines. So I think you can also look to if there are outlying districts that they could be placed in the same polling place as another district, and that may also help some of the issues that we've experienced.
And each district can't have more than 2,000 voters.
2000. And I'll tell you the reason why they had so many districts. This is very easy to understand because I'm an old timer. I've been around, and I remember the machines with the levers. Do you remember the mechanical?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You could pull the lever. When we call it pulling the lever still. They would only accommodate 1,000 votes. So if you had a district with 900 voters, you were fine. If you had a district with, 1,200 voters, you need two machines. Okay? So those machines were expensive back in the day. They were state of the art. They worked. They were very great.
We took those in one
ways.
time, actually.
You probably scrapped
I
a lot
did.
of them, right? Very.
Yeah.
I would have loved one to put in my my barn. I have a barn with six garages. It's a joke we have. I have a big garage. I'd love to have one there. It'd be a kick, but I'd hate to have to move it around all the
Oh,
time.
it was so heavy.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
So those things are antiques, but nonetheless they worked.
Yeah.
They were secure. You couldn't mess around with them. The Democrats and the Republicans together would open them up and they'd read the scroll in the back and they'd read the numbers off. Then the next day they'd recanvass them sometimes to double check. Oh, wait a minute, they made it. They read a 7 as a 1 or something like that, or a 3 as an 8. Nonetheless,
Human error, sure.
yeah. So nonetheless, but you couldn't. There was no electronics or anything like that. So those machines dictated the size of the districts. We haven't used those machines in 16 years. It's time to redistrict the county to less election districts, and when we do that in conjunction to a polling site right sizing, same thing to get it down from 84 to maybe 60. Okay, it's not going to make anyone drive 10 miles. It's not going to cause hardship. It'll be more efficient, but more easy to control and contain any crises or problems. That's my goal, is to risk mitigation. Mitigation is very important for all of us, and business people particularly. We understand that. When we do this, and we have to apply this to our government, as Phil would understand, and you can't have these far-flung outposts running into all these problems on Election Day. We simply cannot control anything that gets out of size, too big, okay?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's worked well, but again, with the new realities, with new technology and the way elections are executed nowadays, it can just be done more efficiently. So you take a system that's much less efficient and make it more more efficient, and at the same time, you're also, as you say, minimizing risk of issues that might occur, and also realizing, as we have, that lacking the number of people available to be poll workers, if that becomes a cemented as a trend in the future, this would also help that problem as well. So that there's a lot of benefit to it. Again, we want to make sure that any changes that are made are conducive to everybody having a convenient place to vote. So that'll be the first and foremost goal of any changes that may come up.
Well, I think that's exactly what my plan is, and it's a plan to make everyone happier. Not that they're unhappy with things. I want to make everyone happier, and I want to make the taxpayers happier too. The voters and the taxpayers are really the same people, but as a voter, you might have different thoughts than as a taxpayer when you put your one cap on and take the other off. We need to wear both caps and look at that like that. That's my view.
Yeah, and also anything we can do to get the election results in earlier. And we're very hopeful based on some of the changes I've already mentioned, where we're investing a great deal of money into equipment and other elements of the Board of Elections system will help that. But then there's also other changes that might be able to be made in the future for maybe other reasons, but it would help with election results getting in that much sooner.
Rate sizing will help there too. But remember something, it wasn't until close to 10 o'clock that many of I would say the first results came back to the building. It was about 9:50 on election night, because they're coming even from up the street. The same person goes to all the districts and picks up what's called the bags, which has the results. Okay, a team of people go to each place, and they get this stuff and they bring them back. So we cannot, you have to you're driving on the roads. You can't do this electronically. It's secure. We don't do it through Wi-Fi or the internet.
How the hell does Florida get it so right then? But, Florida's polls closed at like 8 o'clock, and 9 o'clock the whole state was counted. Everybody knew what was going on. It's crazy.
I think they use the internet, and we don't allow it in New York. We have a really secure. The people talk about cheating and things like that. We don't have a problem with that here. Okay, that sort of hacking because nothing is connected to Wi-Fi or the internet, particularly Wi-Fi.
So you think that's what it is in Florida? They use a lot of
they must be,
internet.
yeah. I haven't been to Florida to meet with their elections officials or anything. I could probably do some homework on that, but they use systems which will transmit results through the internet, Wi-Fi, and things. We don't do that. We do everything physically. It has to come to the building on a card, on an SD card, which is like a jump drive. For young kids who've never seen one, it's probably like a carburetor.
They came into use and they became obsolete on my lifetime.
Within days.
A lot of things.
But our machines are 15 years old.
Okay.
They replaced the ones that replaced the lever machines. So now we're looking to something that's state of the art, much more sophisticated, much more secure. Well, even more secure, I'm going to say, in a lot of ways. They are considered the gold standard of election machines. And we have a lot of citizen advocates that actually come to visit with us, and they walk in our office and they know more about it. It's crazy. They've studied it. They take a lot of time looking into it, and they've asked us, will you buy clear ballot machines? And we say, actually, that's what we're going to do. Oh, thank goodness.
The beauty of the internet. Everybody knows
and
everything.
these are people on both sides of the aisle. This is universally proclaimed to be the best product out there. I don't want to knock the other companies, but these guys are they're the Toyota. I'm not going to call them the Ferrari, because if anybody that's owned a Ferrari, try to change the oil. You got to take the engine out. These are the Toyotas, okay? And I use these kind of you laugh at me because I call
some people like Ford.
I'm an American brand guy, so
that's fine.
You lost me at Toyota.
We'll stay off the brands.
Well, how about
we get the point.
How about
They're
the worldwide brand? Okay, let's talk on a worldwide.
They're good machines.
The good American brand.
Let's be honest. Toyota's worldwide the number one selling car for liability as well. And I said, hey, the Ford Escort. Don't get mad. The Ford Escort, the 1985 Ford Escort, will get you to the grocery store. That's what we have now. and I said it in the newspapers.
Okay, I
People-
like that better.
Okay, but do you want to drive that '85 Ford Escort like to Buffalo?
As long as
In
it
the
gets me
middle of the
there,
night
as
in
long
the
as it's not a
snow.
Toyota, I'm okay.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I guess he'd rather drive that than a new Toyota.
That's right.
I am the
So
treasurer.
Put
of
Jay
the
down
podcast.
for an '85 Escort.
That's right.
Well, we hope this show has been an opportunity to provide some insightful information, not only on the federal but mainly the local elections and some of the issues that occur with local elections, and get a little insight from our Board of Elections Commissioner Joe Suhrada on some of the inner workings and some of the things that we're thinking about into the future, trying to make sure that our elections are safe, efficient, and convenient for all Saratoga County voters. I want to thank Jay Thompson from Two Guys and a Mic podcast. Jay, appreciate you being here. Joe
Very
Suhrada, thank you very much for
Thank you.
for being here. I know it's been a busy period for you, especially this week. So thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here as well. I'm Phil Barrett. We will be back very soon with the next Phil Barrett Show, and we want to talk about finances in our next show. So stay tuned for that, and we want to make sure that we're providing all updated information for you. And I'll have a great guest, and we'll talk about all kinds of topics related to the markets, finances, interest rates, and everything else that'll hopefully help you make some of your business and personal financial decisions. Thank you very much for being with us. We'll see you next time.
We were great. We were free. Had a country that couldn't be beat.
Are we done?
We were right. Yeah.